content presented in this podcast is based on real events and may contain graphic descriptions of violence, sensitive topics, and explicit language that may be triggering, offensive, or sensitive subjects to some viewers and listeners. Discretion is advised. The purpose of this podcast is to explore and discuss true crime cases for entertainment and educational purposes only. This podcast does not intend to glorify or sensationalize crime, but rather aims to analyze and understand the complexities of human behavior in the criminal justice system. We encourage listeners to approach this content with empathy, critical thinking, respect for the victims and their families.
What happens when the line between imagination and reality begins to blur? When the stories we tell ourselves, whether born from fiction, fantasy, or fear, become so consuming that they start to dictate our actions. Most of us dismiss the worlds we invent as harmless daydreams, places to escape for a moment before returning to the safety of reality. But sometimes those fantasies take root. They grow stronger, more dangerous, until the characters no longer stay on the page and the myths no longer stay in the shadows. Tonight, we delve into the delusions of grandeur, exploring what happens when obsession and delusions collide, when young minds caught between innocent and something far darker, surrendering to reality of their own making, and the results are deadly. Now, these two cases are separated by 60 years, continents, and circumstances. These crimes of Ann Perry and the infamous Slender Man stabbing share haunting similarities that speak to the darker corners of youthful imagination, obsession, and delusion. So, with that being said, it's time to start the show. Let's hit it. Hi, and welcome to another episode of Mysteries, Mayhem Merlot. I am your host, Winnie Schrader. Well, tonight's episode, we're kind of going into some unsettling territory when it comes to fantasy colliding with reality and what happens when it turns fatal. Now, we'll be looking at two separate cases that are separated by continents, like I said. They have 6 decades between the two. Their circumstances are different, but yet similar at the same time. I mean, we go from the quiet streets of New Zealand, which you don't really hear much about New Zealand at all, to the quiet rural streets of Wisconsin. Now, these stories force us to confront the difficult question: what happens when the stories we believe or the worlds that we create become more powerful than reason, morality, or even friendship? But first, I'd like to start the night off addressing what happened August 27th in Minneapolis, Minnesota, at Annunciation Catholic School, where gunman 23-year-old Robin Westman, aka Robert Westman, armed with a rifle and a shotgun and a pistol, opened fire through the stained glass windows of Annunciation Catholic Church. The gunfire erupted as children and parishioners were praying during a mass celebration to the start of the school year at Annunciation Catholic School. Now, the attack at the Catholic school in Minneapolis on Wednesday morning was the 4th deadly shooting the city had seen in roughly 24 hours, according to CARE 11 and WCCO. Speaking before the attack at Annunciation Catholic School, Police Chief Brian O'Hara called the level of gun violence in the city over the last day deeply unsettling. Now, the first was about 2 p.m. on Tuesday in South Minneapolis, where a shooter killed one person and wounded 6 others reported citing to police. At 8 p.m. in another location, a shooter killed one man and injured another. Then at around 2 a.m. Wednesday morning, a shooter approached a group on a sidewalk and started shooting, killing one and wounding another, reported to police. Now, Minneapolis police say that Wednesday they do not know if these shootings were connected. Now, when police arrived on the scene, the school was thrown into chaos. Students and teachers huddled behind locked doors, and officers secured the building. Those shaken, the community was sparred from a full-scale violence, the manifesto that this guy just wrote, a massacre that could have claimed dozens and dozens of young lives.
Tears and hugs, an all too familiar scene in America after yet another school shooting. Parents racing to check on their children.
CNN breaking news.
This is a reported shooting at Annunciation Church.
It's just a heartbreaking day.
It happened at Annunciation Catholic School in South Minneapolis during a school mass. This was the first week of classes. The school had just posted photos of students excited to start the new school year. But that joy turned to terror as 30 to 50 shots rang out.
Active shooter inside Annunciation Church. A male wearing all black with a rifle was last seen up at the playground.
During the mass, a gunman approached on the outside on the side of the building and began firing a rifle through the church windows towards the children sitting in the pews at the mass.
Within seconds of this situation beginning, our teachers were heroes. Children were ducked down. Adults were protecting children. Older children were protecting younger children.
This 10-year-old student was there.
It was like shots fired, and then we kind of like got under the pews.
2 children were killed. One 8, the other 10. 17 were injured. Authorities say the shooter took his own life.
Hey, y'all.
He's been identified as 23-year-old Robin Westman, who had no known criminal history. His social media pages have been taken down, but this video is believed to be from his page. It shows guns and ammunition laid out on a bed. This appears to be a hand-drawn layout of a church that Westman then stabs with a knife.
Hope you can read that.
There's also a 4-page handwritten letter to his family and friends. He writes, "I am not well. I am not right. I know this is wrong, but I can't seem to stop myself."
Sometimes these shootings take place for no reason at all, just because you have a very sick individual.
His mother worked at the church until she retired in 2021. This video of students singing was taken a few months ago during happier times. Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Fry fought back tears.
It was the first week of school. They were in a church. These are kids that should be learning with their friends. They should be playing on the playground. They should be able to go to school or church in peace without the fear or risk of violence, and their parents should have the same kind of assurance.
Now let's break down what led up to Robin Westman pulling the trigger on innocent children. Now, minutes before the attack, Robin Westman uploaded a couple videos to YouTube, which were promptly taken down by FBI assistants. Now, the videos show Westman flipping through pages of handwritten journals, interspersed with shots of high-powered firearms, ammunition, and magazines. Now, some of these firearms and the magazines were marked with deeply disturbing phrases with like anti-Semitic messages to harm certain individuals in power. And he was even making references to prior school shooters like Adam Lanza and so on. Now, this one really I found so disturbing, and I have no words to describe how I even feel about it. But one of the cartridges they found that he wrote on there for the children. No, his journals were very cryptic because some of it was written in English, some in Russian. It was a very obscure code-like style how he wrote. And one of his journals includes a bird's eye drawing of a church's interior labeled Annunciation from Memory. The sketch is likely based on the actual building where this shooting took place. Westman's finger is seen stabbing the sketch in one of the videos. Now, notations indicate that a premeditated desire to strike during a mass assembly, the first day of school, or a church service. Westman even considered posing as a car repair person to scout attendance numbers. Now, within the videos and journals, Westman mentions depression, suicidal ideation, labels of writings as being addressed to my family and friends. Writings express fascination and admiration for previous school shooters, particularly like Adam Lanza. And then it was evident hate and extremist rhetoric. Westman claimed motivations were not ideological, but rooted in personal sickness and gratification. Now, I know probably this played a part. I mean, they already admitted to having severe mental illness, suicidal ideation, depressive thoughts, harming themselves, things like that. I'm not sure how well those were addressed, but Robin used to be Robert, and they became transgender, so now they are known as Robin. And with society today, and especially the last couple years with transgender rights and how it's pinned, it's like you either have to be in one corner or the other. And the volatile nature that it's brought to society. I mean, when you have somebody who's already dealing with mental illness, I mean, it could be anywhere from being bipolar, um, but and then throwing on top of that, feeling no acceptance in society, not finding your place, feeling like you're shunned or an outcast, well, that's just like throwing gas on a fire. Now, Westman went on to write that they wanted to go out on their own means. Unfortunately, due to my depression, anger, and twisted mind, I want to fulfill a final act and had been in the back of my head for years, Westman wrote. The note was signed with Robin M. Westman, 2002 to 2025. Law enforcement officials emphasized just how close the city came to another catastrophic mass shooting. Prosecutors are treating the manifesto as crucial evidence of premeditation, underscoring the calculated nature of the plan. Charges are expected to be severe, and the community is already bracing for legal battle ahead. And obviously, the broader impact of the case is the undeniable. The parents are left questioning whether schools are truly safe. Educators are once again grappling with the heavy burden of protecting students in an era where such threats feel increasingly common. Mental health professionals, too, are urging deeper conversation about how alienation, untreated illness, and online radicalization contribute to these violent plots. Now, an 8 and 10-year-old that were sitting in the pews in church during the assembly were killed, police said. Now, 18 people were injured. 15 of those were children, and 3 of those were adults, parishioners that were in their 80s. They all are expected to survive. Now, when Pat Scallion heard gunshots around the corner from his Minneapolis home, I didn't know exactly what it was at first, but after the 10th shot, he said, he knew something was wrong. He raced to Annunciation Catholic School where he saw a magazine on the ground by the church. He said it was eerily quiet, and he immediately turned and ran to the front of the church. And right at the time everyone was coming out, it was chaotic, he told Good Morning America on Thursday. Now, streaming from the church were children suffering emotional and physical wounds, he said, adding that he saw a boy and a girl who had been shot in the head, as well as another girl shot in the neck. He said they were very frightened. They just wanted their moms and dads. And he said he just sat them down and just tried to keep them calm and just kept watching closely to make sure to see if their status changed or not. Now, Scallion said the girl shot in the head asked him, she asked him to please hold her hand. And he did just that. Now, in the end, while tragedy was diverted, the case serves as a sobering reminder behind every manifesto is a person who has decided to turn anger into action, and the difference between prevention and disaster comes down to timing. So yeah, I'll keep you guys updated on any information. Obviously, it being a couple towns over, our news is flooded with it. Um, and I don't want to spend too much time talking about the shooter. Obviously, it's a mental health issue, but please stop with the transgender bashing. That is not the reason this happened. I'm sure it played a part, not because that's what transgender people do. It's untreated mental illness on top of having all these social norms thrown at you and having you to try and not be yourself in society. I mean, there's probably a billion things that have played a part in their mental illness causing this incident to happen. And I don't think it's an excuse for the behavior. But people, if you see the signs and stuff like this and people say something, for God's sakes, if you see something, say something. It's better to be safe than sorry. And, I just hope that the families and the children and the community can heal as best they can, but at least find some comfort and peace here soon. Healing takes time, but not feeling safe in your own area, in your own home, in your own school, kicking off the school year, for God's sakes. And think of this, kindergartners. This is the introduction to school for them, is getting shot up on the first day. Something has to be done. Something's got to change. And the simple fact in Minneapolis, within a 24-hour period, I mean, we had so many shootings. And since then, we've had even more. I don't know what is happening, but Mayor Jacob Fry needs to figure something out and squash this crime in Minneapolis. It's getting out of hand, and now it's kind of leaching over into St. Paul now. So I don't know. Things have to change here in Minnesota, and they better change sooner rather than later. So now let's get to the topic at hand with these delusional demise of these two cases. Now, can you change your identity just to erase a torrid past? Well, not for Anne Perry. Anne Perry, born Juliet Marion Hume or Home on October 28, 1938 in London, England, lived one of the most unusual and controversial lives in modern literary history. As a teenager in New Zealand, she became infamous for her involvement in a brutal 1954 murder of her best friend Pauline Parker's mother, a crime that shocked the nation and later inspired the acclaimed film Heavenly Creatures. Convicted at just 15 years old, she was spared the death penalty due to her age and instead sentenced to detention at Her Majesty's pleasure. After serving 5 years, she was released in 1959 and began rebuilding her life under a new name. Reinventing herself as Anne Perry, she eventually settled into a career as a historical crime novelist, earning an international acclaim for Victorian mysteries. Her debut novel, The Cater Street Hangman in 1979, introduced readers to the Inspector Thomas Pitt and his wife Charlotte, characters who would go on to appear in more than 24 novels. She also created the William Monk series and later branched into works set during World War I, as well as the beloved collection of Christmas novellas. Over the course of her career, Perry published more than 100 books, sold tens of millions of copies worldwide. Her hidden past came back in the spotlight in 1994 when Peter Jackson's film Heavenly Creatures dramatized Pauline and Juliet's murder case, revealing Perry's true identity to the public. Although she rarely spoke about the crime, it cast a shadow over her legacy. Now, when she was young, her father was a respected scientist who would later play an important role in Britain's hydrogen bomb program. Now, Juliet's childhood was marked with illness and instability. She suffered from tuberculosis, which forced her parents to send her away to warmer climates for longer periods of time in hopes of recovery. Now, these early disruptions left her somewhat isolated, craving both connection and escape. By early teens, Juliet was living in Christchurch, New Zealand, where her father had taken a post as rector at the Canterbury University. This is where she met Pauline Parker, a girl who shared her love of stories, drama, and imagination. Now, the two became inseparable almost instantly. Their friendship was intense, passionate, and quickly began to raise concern among parents and teachers who saw the pair withdrawing from the outside world. Now, together, Juliet and Pauline created an elaborate fantasy realm they called the Fourth World. This imagined place was more than a game, it became a consuming delusion. In the fourth world, they envisioned themselves as beings destined for greatness, far superior to the ordinary people around them. They populated this world with kings, queens, saints, and idols, many based on film stars, writers, historical figures they admired. They role played as divine and royal characters, weaving stories in which they were geniuses, visionaries, and even semi divine figures. Their diaries reveal the depths of their belief. Now, Pauline often wrote that she and Juliet were far more intelligent than anyone else and destined for extraordinary lives together. They saw that their bond was not only as a friendship, but as something transcendent, even eternal. The fourth world became their sanctuary, a place where they could retreat from reality and imagine a life free from restrictions, a judgment, and authority. By 1954, however, the real world intruded. Now, Pauline's mother, Honora Reaper, disapproved of their friendship, viewing it as unhealthy and obsessive. Now, with Juliet's parents' marriage crumbling and talks of Juliet possibly being sent overseas, both girls began to fear permanent separation. And in their shared delusion, this was not just a matter of losing a friend, it was a threat to their very existence and to the sacredness of the fourth world. Now, convinced that Honora was the obstacle standing in their way, they made a chilling decision. She had to be eliminated. So on June 22nd, 1954, they lured Honora on a walk through Victoria Park and Christchurch. Pauline carried a half brick wrapped in a stocking hidden in her bag. Now, when the moment came, she struck her mother repeatedly while Juliet assisted, and together they beat her to death. Now, the girls tried to stage the death as an accident, but their story fell apart almost immediately. Bloodied clothes, inconsistent accounts, and Pauline's incriminating diary left doubt as to what had happened. Now, the trial in August 1954 riveted New Zealand and the world. The notion of two schoolgirls committing such brutal, premeditated acts, seemingly without remorse, horrified the public. Now, their obsessive friendship and bizarre fantasy worlds were presented in court, and newspapers portrayed them as dangerous and deranged. Too young to face the death penalty, both girls were convicted of murder and sentenced to an indefinite detention at Her Majesty's pleasure. Now, Juliet spent over 5 years in prison before being released in November of 1959 at the age of 21. Now, upon her release, she disappeared from public view, beginning the careful process of reinventing herself under a whole new name, Anne Perry, leaving behind the fourth world and the crime that nearly defined her forever. Now, she returned to England and began the painstaking work of building a new identity. For a time, she worked ordinary jobs, including being a flight attendant, before she found a call to writing. To fully separate herself from the crime that had defined her as her youth, she adopted the name Anne Perry, and that name would eventually become world famous in the literary world. Now, in the 1960s, Perry's life took another major turn when she converted to Mormonism. The faith's emphasis on repentance, forgiveness, and possibility of redemption resonated deeply with her, but eventually settled with her mother in a quiet Scottish village of Port Mahomet, where she focused almost entirely on her writing. So, over the next 4 decades, she had published over 100 books, selling tens of millions of copies worldwide. She became a New York Times bestseller, She was recognized with honors, including the Edgar Award and the Agatha Award. Her novels stood out for the exploration of justice, class, morality, and redemption themes she knew intimately from her own life. Yet, no matter how successful she became, Perry could not escape her past. Now, in 1994, during director Jackson released the film Heavenly Creatures, dramatizing their murder case. And the film's success led to journalists investigating it, and they found out what happened with the two girls and found out Anne's true identity was eventually revealed to the world. And same with Pauline Parker. Once she was released from detention or whatever Her Majesty requested, yeah, she found a partner, Joan, known as Joe Nathan, and Pauline changed her last name to Nathan and changed her first name, so she became Hillary Nathan. She became a teacher. She was a college graduate, and she just kind of lived out a quiet life the rest of her years as well. So, um, obviously, it seems like they did feel remorse for what they did, and they kinda turned their lives around, and what they did to Pauline's mom, though, that is some deep psychological shit. To beat your mom with a brick? Good lord.
Have you ever felt like something or someone was trying to tell you something? That inner nudge, that quiet whisper from the universe, with intuition sharpened by years of spiritual connection and a deep-rooted gift. Winnie Schrader delivers readings that are compassionate, insightful, and shockingly accurate. Whether you're facing a crossroads healing from heartache, or just curious what the cards reveal, Winnie creates a safe, sacred space to explore your journey. This isn't fortune cookie fluff. This is honest, intuitive guidance from someone who's helped hundreds find clarity, closure, and confidence. If you've been waiting for a sign, this is it. Book your session now at lovelotustarot.com and take control of your journey. That's lovelotustarot.com. Winnie's sessions are personal, powerful, and often life-changing. That's lovelotustarot.com.
Okay, so now we're going to take a look at the Slender Man case, which literally happens 60 years later, but it's two girls having these delusions of grandeur of this Slender Man character. So let's kind of look at this case and see what happened there. The Slender Man stabbing has to be one of the most shocking true crime cases involving children in the digital age. Now, on May 31st in 2014, in the quiet suburb of Waukesha, Wisconsin, two 12-year-old girls, Anissa Wire and Morgan Geyser, lured their classmate and friend Peyton Bella Lautner into the woods. Their intention was chilling: to murder her in an attempt to prove their loyalty to Slender Man, a fictional supernatural character that originated from an internet meme. Believing they had to kill someone to gain his favor and live in his mansion in the forest, they stabbed Peyton 19 times and left her for dead. Against all odds, she managed to crawl to safety and was rescued. The case gripped the nation, raising disturbing questions about influence of internet culture, the blurred lines between fiction and reality for children, and how mental illness can take root at such a young age. So who is this Slender Man character? Well, he didn't start off in a shadowy forest or in a whisper of a ghost story told at sleepovers, but in the glow of a computer screen. Now, in 2009, a Photoshop contest on a forum called Something Awful invited users to craft an eerie image. Pictures so strange and unsettling that they seemed to crawl out of the nightmares. Among the entries was a figure that would soon transcend to the contest itself. Impossibly tall, faceless, dressed in a dark suit, and looming silently behind him, unsuspecting children. And he was called Slender Man. Now, the image struck a chord. It was kind of a horror that didn't rely on gore or jump scares, but on suggestion. A blank face where one should be a human form stretched too long, too thin, wrong. Soon stories sprang up to explain him. These were the creepypastas, digital folklores passed from user to user, much like campfire tales that had been traded for generations. Now, each retelling made him more and more real. He stalked children, he whispered to the vulnerable, lured the lonely into his grip. Fan art, YouTube videos, even homemade documentaries added layers of myth until Slender Man was no longer just a picture on a forum. He had become a digital boogeyman, living in the corners of the internet and in the imaginations of those who feared him. What made Slender Man unique wasn't just his appearance, but the way he spread. Unlike Bloody Mary or the Hookman, legends that lived on oral traditions, Slender Man grew in real time across forums, blogs, and videos. Anyone could add to his story, and in doing so made him more and more alive. He was a creature built by collective imagination, and the more and more people believed it, the more tangible he seemed to become. Those are also known as a tulpa. But as with many myths, the lines between fiction and reality blurred. For most, Slender Man was just a chilling story to click through late at night. But for others, especially impressionable minds, he became something darker, an obsession, a figure of influence, even a justification for violence and bad behavior. Now, on the morning of the attack on May 31st, 2014, the three girls, friends who had just gathered for a sleepover the night before, went to a nearby park. The atmosphere seemed playful at first, but hidden beneath the laughter was a deadly plan crafted by Anissa and Morgan. The girls led Peyton into a secluded wooded area under the guise of a hide-and-seek game. How innocent does that sound to you? They went into the forest under the guise to play hide-and-go-seek. So disturbing and sad. But it was there that Morgan, urged on by Anissa, pulled out the kitchen knife and stabbed Peyton 19 times in her torso, arms, and legs. Despite the brutality of the attack, none of the wounds struck any major arteries or her heart, a miracle that later saved her life. Now, bleeding heavily and struggling to breathe, Peyton begged her friends for help. They coldly told her to lie down and be quiet, promising that they would get help, but never intended to. Instead, they fled, leaving her alone in the woods. Now, summoning up incredible strength, Peyton dragged herself to a nearby bike path where a passing cyclist found her. He called 911 and saved her life. Now, Anissa and Morgan were just 12 years old when they plotted this attack. To outsiders, they were ordinary middle schoolers, but behind closed doors, they had become consumed with the mythology of the Slender Man. Now, Morgan in particular, who later was diagnosed with onset schizophrenia, which blurred her ability to separate fantasy from reality. Now, Anissa, though not mentally ill in the same way, was impressionable and deeply drawn into Morgan's delusions. Now, the two convinced each other that Slender Man was real and that the only way to prove themselves worthy to him was through murder. After the attack, they began walking toward Nicollet National Forest, believing that they would find Slender Man's mansion there. Now, when police apprehended them hours later, the girls expressed little remorse, still convinced they had acted out of necessity. The interrogation videos, when they brought the girls in, Morgan's just sitting there. She's like, yeah, we did it to make Slender Man happy, to appease Slender Man. And it was like matter of fact for her.
It was stunning. Two Waukesha sixth graders stabbing a classmate 19 times, leaving her for dead. But the reason shocked the nation.
I use tendrils that are very sharp.
The girls said they did it in fear of and to impress the internet boogeyman Slenderman.
What were you trying to do with her when you stabbed her?
Kill her. I might as well just say it. We were trying to kill her.
This recorded confession in 2014 at the Waukesha Police Department is a main issue in Geyser's appeal.
What did you do next?
I already told you.
What was that?
Stab, 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 stab.
Geyser ultimately pleaded guilty and was sentenced up to 40 years in a mental hospital. Her appeal challenges whether she really had the ability to waive her rights against incriminating herself.
When she said that she would give a statement waiving her rights, she didn't have any comprehension of what those rights were.
This week, the appeal gained some allies, with the Philadelphia-based Juvenile Law Center among those filing a supporting brief.
We are deeply concerned that this was simply not a lawful or constitutional waiver of her rights.
But prosecutors maintain, quote, the video evidence in particular shows Geyser was a smart, responsive, calm girl who was capable of understanding the rights explained to her.
And there was no emotion. It was just very scary to see a child lack that emotion and not to even feel scared. I mean, you're being interrogated by a cop for murder at 12 years old, and you're like, yeah, I just did it to make him happy. You know, wow. That's some deep, deep, deep stuff there, too. Deep, deep stuff there. But Peyton Bella Lautner was an ordinary sixth grade kid who was kind-hearted. Now, on that day, that sixth grader endured a horror few could only imagine. Being stabbed 19 times and being left alone in the woods to die. And the surgeons later revealed that some of the knife wounds came within millimeters of hitting vital organs, including her heart. Her recovery was long and painful, both physically and emotionally. I can't imagine it wouldn't. But yet over time, Peyton showed remarkable resilience. She returned to school surrounded by a supportive family in her community. And her story became not only one of trauma, but also survival and strength. And in the face of an unmatchable betrayal by friends she once trusted. Yeah, I mean, just the impact on how she approaches relationships from that point on in her life. I mean, kudos to Peyton for taking a very mature look at what happened to her. And obviously, I mean, I don't know if she's forgiven the girls, but she had to have done something similar to that for her to be able to move on. Now, the court proceedings were lengthy and complex, largely because of the perpetrators' ages and their mental health evaluations. Now, both Anissa and Morgan were charged as adults due to the seriousness of the crime, sparking national debate about juvenile justice. Now, in 2017, Anissa pled guilty to being party to the attempted second-degree homicide and was sentenced to 25 years in a mental health institution. Now, Morgan pleaded guilty to attempt a first-degree homicide and, given her schizophrenia diagnosis, was sentenced to 40 years in a mental hospital. The trials captivated the public health, raising difficult questions about how to balance accountability with compassion with dealing with mentally ill children who commit violent crime. But you want to know one thing I look at it is that these girls are obviously where they need to be in a mental institution and hospital where they can get the proper treatment because, and I'm not saying that their parents are bad parents, but they didn't see the signs leading up to them stabbing their friend for Slender Man. So I don't think they're equipped to handle a child who has schizophrenia and another child who can't really decipher right and wrong or not. Now, this case has had a cultural impact, obviously. It became flashpoints in conversation about internet safety, obviously, mental health, and the power of online myths. Now, parents, teachers, and psychologists alike debated how much influence stories like Slender Man could have been on impressionable kids. The stabbing inspired documentaries, books, and fictionalized retellings. Now, with HBO's documentary Beware of the Slender Man providing one of the most in-depth looks at the case. Now, beyond the media portrayals, the event served as a warning about the darker corners of internet culture and the vulnerabilities of children navigating fantasy worlds within guidance. Now, evil rarely ever announces itself loudly. It likes to creep in, fester, and it likes to take the right moment to strike when you least expect it. Obviously, the case that we just had August 27th in Minneapolis. But each of these stories leaves us with the same haunting question: how many others are out there like this? Writing manifestos, planning violence, waiting for their chance. Sometimes the darkest mysteries aren't hidden in history books or legends. They're unfolding in real time, and sometimes it's just down the street. Now, the Catholic school shooting serves as a chilling reminder of how quickly safety can be shattered, even in the places we believe untouchable. The discovery of the suspect's manifesto revealed not just a plot against the innocent lives, but a disturbing mindset shaped by obsession, anger, and meticulous planning. It highlights the growing urgency of conversations about school security, mental health in the dark corners of the internet, where dangerous ideas take root. Thank you guys so much for joining me. Yeah, a very sad story out of Minneapolis, but I will definitely keep you guys updated if any big news comes about, but it's senseless and sad. So my thoughts and my prayers go out to all the families affected and to the communities and to the state of Minnesota. We all support you. And I saw a very, very touching Facebook post that I shared. A photographer took a picture of a mother running down the street toward the school when parents were getting the calls that there was a active shooter at the school. And she's running down the street with her shoes in hand. And it just shows you the tenacity and the love that parents have for their children and how they will run into fire to save their children. But that was really touching, and the post was saying that all of us parents were running with you. So thank you guys so much, and I hope to see you all next week. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Mysteries, Mayhem, and Merlot. And until our next case, my armchair detectives, stay safe, stay vigilant, and stay aware. I'll see you right here next week on Mysteries, Mayhem, and Merlot.